Hello everybody and welcome to today's briefing, the Worker Protection Act for staff working within the further education sector. My name is Carly and I'm the consultant who's going to be talking through with you today our 10-minute briefing on this piece of legislation. So let's open up, shall we, by thinking about the legal context and framework and what the Worker Protection Act of 2023 is here to prevent harm of. Now, the key focus in this piece of legislation is the prevention of sexual harassment or sexual misconduct for employees' experience within the workplace. And this theme is not a new one. When we talk about preventing sexual harassment, it certainly was listed within previous legislation too. The Equalities Act of 2010, Section 26, very much had that statement around outlining and outlawing sexual harassment through the course of somebody's work and conduct. 2010, however, was more of a neutral statement, didn't really outline the duties and responsibilities that employers had in preventing this harm from happening. The Worker Protection Act now closes that gap. It now has a more specific focus on the role of the employer in the prevention of this type of harm happening through ensuring it takes reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment of employees as part of the course of their conduct and role with them. And when we think about what is at stake, well, of course, the harmful experiences of our employees, wanting to make sure that the workspace for them feels safe and comfortable. But there's also now, on the back of the passing of this law, going to be huge implications to the employer who's thought to breach what it says are reasonable steps and that duty to prevent the harm happening in the first place. And what that looks like is if it does reach an employment tribunal, the tribunal itself may find the employer has breached their reasonable steps duty and therefore could be ordered to pay up to 25% compensatory uplift award to the employee as a result. Huge implications, therefore, to the employer as much as trying to address the issue. And with heavy sanctions like that, we do, of course, hope that employers will now take action to ensure that their workspace is safe for all its employees. But part of that is about correctly identifying and raising awareness on what are the different forms of harm that could constitute within this space, constitute as forms of sexual harassment or indeed sexual misconduct. And the Equalities and Human Rights Commission has helped us out here. They have provided for us this list you can see on the screen, very clear and tangible examples of the different forms and types of behaviour that may constitute as harmful within this space. Things which the employer on the back of this law should be taking those reasonable steps to prevent. Whether it be physical behaviours and conduct, perhaps words, jokes, comments or statements, the sharing of inappropriate content. It's these types of behaviours which we are deliberately referencing as those harmful acts that could be massively impactful to those subject to them throughout the course of their time within the workplace. So where should all employers start? And that, of course, is often with an audit or a needs analysis. Working out and really applying this in the context of what's specific to the sector, to the staff within it. And of course, within further education, we also have the additional consideration here for our duty of care to our students. Students, as part of the courses they're studying with us, may naturally have an element of a workplace, a place where they go to have that hands-on learning. And our duty with this legislation extends to our consideration to them too, making sure that as part of their overall course experience and their apprenticeship placement, their workspace, they're equally not affected by this harm either. So as much information and a duty that we have brokering our relationship with employers that we cultivate to support our students' learning, to make sure them as employees, as well as students, are safeguarded from this harm as well. So that's very much the demographic in the sector that we need to consider as part of our own workspace, our duty to employees, but also the wider considerate duty to our learners in their workplace as well. And of course, depending on the sector that they're working within, depending on the environment, depending on the way your provision runs, we have to think about environmental considerations too. For example, remote provisions. How do we ensure that communication and contact through that medium is safeguarded? And that naturally may look very different to organisations such as large colleges that might have a campus where students join and attend. So environmental considerations need to adhere to as well. But also, what is the understanding and knowledge of all our workforce? Making sure all employees are very clear on the do's and do nots within their behaviour, the examples that we touched on a screen earlier around sexual misconduct. Are we clearly highlighting, giving tangible examples to our employees in their staff code of conduct framework? Are we ensuring our wider policies reference our duty, and of course what actions and steps we are able to take to prevent this harm from happening? And most importantly, how do we respond? What are the reporting mechanisms you provide your staff if they became involved with or maybe witnessed an incident of this nature? Who and how do they report? So all of those action steps that may come from that initial audit quantify to this term and duty of reasonable steps and action. Because ultimately, what will be deemed reasonable for one provision may naturally look very different from another. It will be dependent on things such as the size, the sector, the working environments, spaces, the duties of care that we have, and of course, capacity and resources too. But regardless if you are a small training provider, perhaps you are working with very small employers, we all have the same legal duty now. All employers, regardless of size, have to take these action on board to make sure the workplace is safe for all of its workforce. So reasonable steps then should definitely not be seen as just a tick box activity on the passing and back of this law. It links to all of our themes here we can see on the screen, thinking about the culture there within your organisation. For our students, equally the culture in their workplace experience too. How are those places, as well as our own, proactive, reviewing systems and procedures, identifying risks, doing assessments of need? And how are we raising awareness and training for all of our workforce to understand this space and to have clarity on how will we address and respond to it as and when there's needs? As well, of course, what are the possible outcomes? What are the steps with regards to the investigation, the measures we take, responding to instances? Now, if today is your first time engaging with us, or perhaps this duty as outlined within the legislation, please don't limit your learning to this alone today. We have lots of great wider free resources available to you, equally to any employers your training provision engages with, if they're also not quite knowing where to start in terms of administering these types of requirements on the back of the Worker Protection Act. We've got blogs, we've got podcasts, we're all over social media. We can engage with you, offer bespoke training, consultancy and auditing, so please do reach out to us, either by having a look at our landing page highlighted here on the screen, or drop us in an email at info@ecpsafeguarding.co.uk. Thank you so much for stopping by, and we hope to engage with you in soon. Take care.